So in terms of thinking about anxiety in a little bit more detail, you'll all know, I would imagine, that a certain amount of anxiety is to be expected. And actually, it serves as a really important function in our evolution and in our daily lives, as do all our emotions. It becomes problematic, though, when that anxiety becomes severe, persistent, and chronic, and when it interferes with a child's sort of daily functioning, such as no longer being able to attend school or to at least attend school consistently, and those sort of difficulties that might be felt around attending school. So let's take a look at this model of anxiety that you can see on your screen and its interaction with emotionally based school avoidance. In the top part of the model, you can see that the child experiences negative thoughts and feelings about school. Those negative thoughts might be specifically in relation to things that are happening in school that are causing anxiety. So, for example, academic or other related issues, or anxiety such as separating from you, their parents, or their carers. So, but it's more about what attending school represents for the child. So the negative thoughts about school feel really unpleasant, they're unsettling, and they sort of whiz round and round in the child's head. And rarely does the child stop to challenge those thoughts. Instead, the more they think about them, the more they begin to believe them. And they also begin to look for clues and evidence in their environment that confirm that these anxious thoughts are actually true. So the child fixates on that perceived threat. So, for example, the school environment and the uncertainty that this leads to, and the uncertainty that that has leads to even more anxious thoughts and feelings. And then as we move through to the next part of the cycle, the next two parts of the cycle, how the child responds to this anxiety, the default response to anxiety, particularly if there's an absence of coping strategies or alternative resources, is to try to avoid the situation that's invoking the anxiety and triggering those negative automatic thoughts and uncomfortable feelings within the body. And you'll know this yourselves. If something makes you really anxious, you'll probably tend to try to avoid it. And as adults, we can probably do that fairly well. Children, it's more difficult for them to do it because the expectation, of course, is that they're in school. And if that's what's creating the anxiety, it makes it really difficult for them to avoid. So the child seeks to avoid school or maybe particular lessons that they're finding quite challenging. And that provides some temporary relief from the anxiety, a bit of respite from the anxious thoughts and fears that have been developing and growing. Of course, then what happens is that we go through it all over again. And so next time they need to go to school or they need to go to that lesson, that anxiety just comes straight back. So we'll move through the cycle again. And as you can see, the relief from that anxiety is only temporary. It's really short term because the anxious thoughts and the feelings, they haven't been addressed. They haven't been challenged. They've just been avoided. And those fears continue to grow. And the next time the child is confronted with that situation, the anxiety feels much, much worse. Through those experiences, the child also begins to question their ability to cope, and thinking errors might become even more embedded. If they don't get a chance to cope, then they're going to assume that they can't cope. They will begin to catastrophize, make predictions based on the worst case scenario, or envisage themselves not coping, playing out those different scenarios in their mind, imagining that only the worst is likely to happen. And the more they avoid, the more embedded these thinking errors become, and then we go round and round and round the cycle over and over again. Each time that you go around the cycle, there's increased anxiety and even more entrenched avoidance behaviors.